Hello and welcome to Glass Houses. If you're watching this, you're going to notice something's a little different about my setup. Instead of having my little desk mic, I got like this, ridiculous yellow boom mic coming out here. Because I don't know how, but I lost my little desktop mount. It's in the barn somewhere. And I just ran out and I grabbed one of these and like I was keeping it cool, but then the boom is stripped. So like I put the mic on, I put it where I wanted and I let go and the thing just sunk. And it just did that like, F you, you're going to have a bad day sync. You know how like a microphone, like the stand just it goes so slowly, like it's just staring at you like, yeah, buddy. Yeah, there go your plans, So right now, I love to like move my camera to show you, but that's just going to, maybe I'll take a picture. I now have an old snare drum rim with no head. So it's just the rim as a counterweight, perfectly placed on the other side of this to keep it in place, right? And I say this because, as we'll find out in our show today, sometimes things don't go as planned at a show. And sometimes you just got to lose your mind over it.
Absolutely.
Cold open.
This is Glass Houses, a Billy Joel podcast.
Hey, this is Liberty DeVito.
This is John Jackson, director of the Billy Joel Archive.
This is Russell Javers.
This is Mike Del Judas.
This is Richie Canada, and you're listening to Glass Houses, a Billy Joel podcast. It's awesome.
So a while back, Jack, you and I went through the original 1987 A Matter of Trust documentary, which I remember watching when it aired on, I think it was ABC or CBS, one of the major networks back then. This time around, we're fast forwarding to 11 years ago, 2014. They shot a brand new documentary, obviously using a fair amount of the old footage, but a lot of new footage and a whole lot of new interviews, and released this incredible set called Billy Joel, A Matter of Trust, The Bridge to Russia. So today we are going to be diving into the documentary portion of that set.
And before we do that, I want to bring up something wholly unrelated. We have some fans of the podcast in Land Down Under. In particular, Stephen Jeffrey is in the band Atlas Genius, who had a hit with Trojans back in 2011. And they were coming to the U.S. again. This time they were coming to Philadelphia. And I was trying to make plans to go see them because he let me know. And unfortunately, not all their visas went through. So they had to cancel their tour, which really blows. Like that hurts. So I was pretty bummed about it. But what I did do, hold on, I got to move now, is I ordered their new record, End of the Tunnel. And I made sure, because they must have like really gotten screwed on this, if you go to their website and you order the record, you can pay a little extra. You get the autographed version, which is fun. Michael, I know you appreciate. Now I have a collector's item. How do you like that?
I like it, man. Nice signed record. I dig it.
Yeah, no, it's cool. And I just gave it a quick listen. It just came in, and I gave it a quick listen today, like just kind of walking around the house, sort of listen.
Oh, you've got a different colorway than I do. Mine's on white vinyl. That's a nice orangish.
Yeah, it's like red with some orange, splatters on it.
Yeah, that's very cool.
When I put on Trojans, because I didn't know them by name, and I looked it up, and I was like, oh my God, this cannot be more 2011. Like, if we were wearing bell bottoms in 2011, I'd be like, oh my God, where are my bell bottoms? Like, but just like, oh my, dude, you hear this song, you're like, yeah, if wherever you were 14 years ago, you'll remember. And the new record, it's like I said, I don't know it that well yet because I just gave it a spin. But it's like, it's got that nice, real thin production that was like kind of in vogue at the turn of the decade there. Like it turned into Chainsmokers, which is kind of fine, but like it was just a little more like thin and kind of fun like that, like that airy pop sound, and updated like just a little, you know what I mean? It doesn't sound like they were hermetically sealed, but it's definitely like, it's actually, isn't it weird to say that's like, it's retro now?
I know, right?
like 2011 is like almost oldies. But it's a pretty cool record. I think right now, On a Wave, I think is my favorite. Like it was just the one that kind of popped the most. So Steven's written to us a couple times. We've chatted with him. He's a cool dude. I feel really bad that they got the screw on this. Mm-hmm. So we have no sponsors, but I would highly recommend everybody check out Atlas Genius, End of the Tunnel. Check it out on your streaming platform. And if you like it, this is one to shell out for. Help them out, man. Hopefully they get back to the States.
Yeah, absolutely. And I had the good fortune to see them last year in 2024 when the band did make it through the States. I get a chance to sit and chat with Steven after the show and hang out a little bit. Super nice guy. And he's a keyboard player in the band. appropriately. But yeah, fantastic player, great high energy live show, real treat. So hopefully they get a chance to come back around and y'all can check them out for sure.
Yeah. So anyway, we're not the only ones that have gone across the border.
No,
How's that for a segue?
Billy Joel and the band did back
Right.
in the 80s. Quite an interesting time in Billy's career.
And coming off the documentary that we are now really brings it into focus. That must have been like the peak, like
Yeah.
in every which way. You know what I mean? Like everything took a dump sort of right after that.
You know, for the all the background, all the Frank Weber stuff was really about to come to a head. Frank was still
Yeah.
around. It was shortly after where he was getting found out. They had finally had a little time off between the Bridge and Stormfront because, you know, the Bridge tour went through 1987. Billy was off the road in 88. And you see those, you know, saw the home videos of them, you know, road tripping on the East Coast and all that stuff. And so all of this was bubbling under. Billy's out there slogging away on a tour on a record that's just not performing like the others were. And then you have Billy's longtime band. These guys have been with him throughout the 80s. And then you had the Core Lords band since 76. That was coming to an end. There was a lot of changing and stress and things going on top of that. Plus, doing this tour of Russia, it becomes one of the big political stories of that summer. And all of this was falling on his shoulders.
And Russia was, to quote our good friend Bradley, quote unquote, wacko Disneyland. If you go and find our like first interview with him, I think it was like the second episode we put out. I think that was in the outtakes. He talks about his experience with Billy there, and that was that was the way he led into it. I tell you what I like about this documentary. The first thing you're going to ask yourself is like, why did they remake the same documentary? Right? Like there was already a documentary on this, but I think this one is the one like you and I would have made. And I thought that the second there was a mention of how many trailers they had going for each concert, I'm like, yeah, that's the kind of thing you and I would leave in, you know? So
yeah, you're like, okay, here we go. This is the kind of nuts and bolts that we didn't get the first time around.
Exactly. And it's obvious why. I mean, you know, when the first one came out, the story was more global. You know, this was new to a lot of people, relatively just happened. And so the story to tell was the ambassadorship of going to Russia. This time it's much more retrospective, and that makes it really interesting. So it does make it a great companion.
With this new one, primary production was probably done in 2013 because it premiered in early 2014. We'll get into all that. But you had now 25 years of hindsight and reflection. They had governmental folks, Wayne Isham, who directed the concert film. And you had a lot of the band members. We've never seen Kevin Dukes do a Billy Joel interview before. You know, it struck me again watching this. This is 2014. And I'm so grateful that knowing Steve Cohen now as we do, I think he probably had a bit to do with it, with getting Liberty and Russell involved. Because at that time, they were both pretty well estranged from Billy. This was not long before the Hired Gun documentary came out, and Liberty was still vocal and salty about the whole Billy Joel thing. So this was way before the amends was made, but they smartly thought to involve them. I just remember it was so nice to see Liberty talking positively about Billy again for a little while.
The fallout is even referenced here in an interesting way, which I guess we'll get into in a bit.
This film was released in early 2014, and it actually started out as a Showtime premiere. It was directed by a guy named Jim Brown. It was on January 31st, 9 p.m. local time. This was before you could stream it. So I remember very distinctively being really bummed out that I didn't have Showtime and spending a little time seeing if I knew anybody who did. Like, hey, can I come over for a little bit?
Yeah.
And my cousin Drew and his wife Rachel, they had it. By that point we hadn't hung out in a while, as you do when you become adults. You don't see each other that often. Even though he didn't live far, but he was like, yeah, we've got it. He's like, actually, we haven't hung out in a while, so why don't we just make a night of it? I'm like, perfect.
Well, and then you remembered why you didn't hang out. No, just kidding. So I was there watching Breakfast at Tiffany's.
Right. Yeah. So Jenny and I went over there and had a great evening hanging out. And this was before a lot of teasers, so, or leaks and things like that. So we didn't really know what this was going to be about. It turned out to be quite a fun watch, and I'm excited to dive into it.
Let's do it.
All right.
I really like the beginning on this. It really sets up the whole Cold War thing. It occurs to me now how much more important that was to do in 2014, because that's 25 years after the Berlin Wall came down.
Mhm.
A lot of people, I think, young people wouldn't have a concept of that. I barely had a concept of that. Like, you knew USSR this, USSR that as a kid. And I think once, like, you and I, at least me, really started to understand what was going on, the wall came down. And that was probably the first time we really understood anything.
Right.
It
Same here.
was great to see Billy put that into perspective, and really sets up the motif of the connective power of music. There was a Tchaikovsky piano competition in Russia, and an American won. And in Billy's recollection, that was the first moment where he was like, "Oh, they're people too. Like, they they didn't not let us win, so it can't be that bad." However he put it.
Yeah. Kudos to Jim Brown and the team who did this documentary for really utilizing the angle that Billy can speak passionately about history. He's a big history buff. So the fact that they went at it from that history perspective, and then the classical music, two passions of his. So to see that angle early in the film, knowing what we knew about how they approached And So It Goes, I'm like, okay, this is a good way to get him comfortable.
I did like that they made some balance between Billy being able to appreciate his ambassadorship with also not making it sound like he brought down the Berlin Wall himself. Because a little while in, I was like, man, I really hope that they don't just stroke Billy on this. Like, yeah, it did make a difference. It did have an impact on people, but obviously there were so many other things. And, a couple of people said, like, obviously it wasn't just Billy. And they talk a little bit about, like, all the other things that were happening at the time.
Mhm.
And maybe it's a weird thing to say, but I was really happy that they didn't, like, brush past that and just let everybody talk about what an impact one Mr. Joel had on international politics.
Without saying it, it would have completely trivialized the rest of the world and what was going on with this.
Right.
It was certainly part of the movement, and it was a great gesture from an American artist. And it goes to, Billy as well, too, saying that, yes, he wanted this to have a positive impact, but he was very calculated. I'm not making any grand statements. And he used the term, that would have given me feet of clay. He's like, I want to connect with people, but I don't want to ever try to oversell what this could be.
This is something I feel like we touched on recently, although I can't remember. But just thinking about music as communication, and when even instrumental music can communicate something. It's not necessarily a narrative, and it's not just emotion. There's something that happens if you're attuned to it and you're doing it right. Assuming that a lot of people did not speak English, this was essentially instrumental music. Most of the lyrics that he was singing, they weren't going to know. He wasn't going to land something on that. It had to be the spirit of the performance and the power of the melodies. And I think I've mentioned before, like, that's what made Billy such a great artist to go over, because his live show was so energetic, and because the musical foundations of his songs are so strong and so robust. One of the things that I remember hearing from a few people that around my age, actually, one woman grew up in Belarus, another guy, I can't remember if he lived in Russia or his parents did, or he was a kid and came over, but they both stressed to me at different times, and they didn't know each other, just what emphasis was placed on the arts actually in the USSR. And I think it was supposed to be their thing. Like, they were going to show that, like, the communist country, no, we're not primitive. Look at this beautiful art. Look at this beautiful music. Look at these amazing musicians we produce. So, like, a lot of people in Russia knew music really well. A lot of them could play. A lot of them at least had the vocabulary. So that's what made Billy such a great person to send over there, because he's rock and roll, but he's also something that they could latch on to. AC/DC would have been a good time, but it also might have been like giving a college student third grade math.
They also didn't have the exposure to the American production of a live show.
Yeah, and that was the thing that came into play with the trucks that they were talking about. And where they had to go get, like, more chairs from, like, different banquet halls and stuff.
Red churches. It's funny. It just made me laugh. Because, you've been a professional musician for years, playing all over the place.
It's overselling it a little, but yeah, I have set up drums in many a bar.
You are an active gigging musician, sir.
There you go. That's a little better. Can't let you go on the record with that.
And I've had my years doing that in the past as well. And you and I can regale stories of having to cobble together to make a show
Oh
go.
yeah.
You know,
Oh, we just did that 2 weeks ago.
Look at what you're talking about, rigging the mic stand over there to get that. I mean, this is what we do. Gaffer tape and good luck and you can make it work.
Yeah.
It was kind of sweet, like hearing them talking about for a Billy Joel show, going to churches and halls and like to cobble together all these chairs just so they had enough for the people.
And, speaking of the people, I enjoyed in this one some more dimension that they put to the stories that we knew. The story had been told about the beginning of the first concert, especially, was very tense. Everybody was just very polite. And then the government officials up front had enough, so they left, and the young people took their seats, and and then it really started to open up. But I liked the story about the soldiers, the young soldiers that were like jumping up and down, and then like their superior officers were scowling at them and telling them to get down.
Right.
And they made the point that I think they were conscripted. You didn't necessarily have party liners in uniform. You had essentially kids that got uniforms thrown on them. And that's a really striking thing. I think that is in itself an interesting look at, that connective tissue of music. It overrode the uniform. It overrode what they were supposed to do.
You could tell how conflicted they were.
With
expressing how they were feeling in the moment.
Thinking about like the similarities in that idea of like, they're all just people. When they played Big Man on Mulberry Street, it was like, shots of the city. That's like a great song, especially for like some footage of Manhattan in the 80s, because obviously that's where Billy wrote it and where he wrote it about. That's a deft move on the part of the editor or the director. Sans a few of the distinct architectural flourishes, this could be any city. That was a nice move. Like if you showed that to somebody in a vacuum, I don't think they'd be like, is that Russia?
When you strip away some of this stuff, they're not as different as people make it out to be, which is a big theme throughout.
Now, of course, the other thing this documentary had to go into was the infamous Billy tantrum.
Oh, yeah.
I'm a little bummed we still haven't gotten more footage because it has to exist.
I know. It's still the same footage from the original, which was oddly cut together to show just the parts where he's yelling or smashing stuff, basically.
Right.
I was bummed too. I'm like, they had camera rolling, multiple cameras rolling throughout the tune.
I mean, that was the problem.
Let's just, all right, John Jackson.
Yeah.
As we're rolling stuff on YouTube, we know this footage is there. Yeah. Let's talk about getting the uncut, sometimes a fantasy footage here.
Exactly. What I liked about this was they planted those seeds early on, and they almost red herringed it because they talked about the tension going into the first show, which was the Opera House, which was when Billy got sandbagged. He thought it was going to be like a jam session, a get together, and then next thing he knows, he's on a stage.
People show up.
Yeah, thousands of people there. Everybody's quiet, and the PA sucks, so he oversang.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was funny how they really set it up to think like he was going to throw the tantrum early, and then he had a good show because it was the next one was the first formal concert. Right. That went fine. And you're like, oh, okay. So I think it's a great point to make that like, it's going to build up, that stuff's going to stay with you. Even if you had a good night the night before, like you still got some emotional plaque.
Russell Javers spoke really well about that and likened it to, Billy being like a rubber band being slowly pulled.
Yeah.
Had people with him all the time, camera crew all the time, so many interviews, these shows, all these different things nonstop. He's certainly not sleeping enough, I'm sure. Already struggling with his throat after the jam session. And so it was just slowly building up. In the moments leading up to it, they did a really nice job laying it out, how it was a gradual build. They could see something was going to go.
I think it was funny how they were building it up, and then they stopped, right? Because then he made it through the first show, and then he snapped. So like that in itself sort of makes it a surprise again.
Right.
Because like you think it's going to happen here, and it doesn't. Maybe you almost forget about it. And then like, oh, right, shoot, here it is. Here we go. I love Steve Cohen's account of it here. I feel like that was probably a great insight to their dynamic,
right.
and just those dynamics in general.
Yeah.
It is amazing how long these people have worked together and stayed friends, let alone have worked together this long. And there has to be like that understanding of like tempers are going to flare, things like that, you know, and the breakdown of like how that interaction went, I thought was really telling.
And then, you know, they had Liberty speaking to hearing the noise of the Yamaha CP80 getting flipped over.
Yeah.
So he's playing the tune, you know, he's getting into it, he's whatever. Maybe he isn't catching that Billy's yelling a few lines here and there.
Mm.
I can only imagine the sound that keyboard made as it got flipped over in the monitors.
Right. Yeah.
And Liberty's like, I just suddenly hear bang. And he's like, what the heck was that? But what I love in that footage too, when they cut back to it, is that you see Billy just storming down the ramp towards downstage. And you see lead guitar player Kevin Dukes and Dave LeBolt, who's playing a guitar. They kind of gravitate to each other and they're talking and looking over their shoulder and like, what is he doing? You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
I love that bit.
Somebody on, and I think I'll end this section here because like I feel like this always overshadows everything. But somebody on like YouTube, somebody had uploaded the footage, and somebody had commented like, "Does anybody notice how these two guys are just playing this off like it's part of the show? It happens every night." Like this guy is like swinging at things and people. And those two are just like, yeah, you know, just still rocking and rolling. Like, I think they said that, like, people thought it was part of the show. They're like, oh, what are you going to break tonight?
Right. That's pro musician right there.
Right. Yeah.
You know,
No, unflappable.
things are burning all around you and you just got to keep playing because you know what? Love the guys, love the band. They're not the artist. You can't be the guy to fall apart on the stage.
You know what else I liked? They gave more of the background to the Gregorian chant.
Yes.
Because in the first one, I think they did, speaking of editing, I think they did Billy a little bit of a disservice there. They're in this centuries old monastery building, whatever it was. And the Russians are like doing this thing. And then they cut to like Billy singing doo-wop. And it looks like kind of like a douchey move, you know? But
right.
You know, like that's what you're going to come back with. Like, oh, here is like centuries old spiritual music. What do you got? Doo-wop, 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 you know.
Yeah.
But the setup this time makes it seem more of a cultural exchange. It's a funny thing because, you know, you almost forget American culture just isn't as old as anything in Europe. That actually makes more sense that way. And just the lead into it didn't feel like they were retconning anything, didn't feel like they were fixing it. It just felt like they had more room in this version. They probably just wandered into it. Not like Billy's like, oh, I'm going to show them, you know, here's Frankie Lemon and the teenagers. Like, wow, you know,
right. Yeah.
It's going to change people's religion right here. And that puts a different bent on like the Russian singers joining in, you know, music being, you know, the connective tissue. I keep saying connective tissue when it's like music being universal, music being the communication. It's not about the lyrics, like nor is the Gregorian chant about the lyrics. It's the effect it has on you. Do you ever like listen to that? I used to have a record of it.
Yeah.
The St. Benedictine monks, I think it was. Like they were famous for a half second. Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember I actually bought that in 2013 and I used to listen to it and it was like, yeah, it's atmospheric, you know, it's ambient.
It really is.
Yeah. And so it's a different feel, but.
And I really appreciate Billy wanted to connect with the musicians of Russia. You know, that's his language, that's his comfort. And I really appreciate as well, too, that they involved Stas Namen and Andrei, I forget his last name, and two well-known Russian musicians, is speaking about the musical connection of Billy coming to Russia and how different that was.
That would be up our alley, is to get into the nuts and bolts and have a musician talking about the actual music, whereas the first one obviously focused more on the cultural touchstones.
I love the fly on the wall kind of footage. And there was some of that in the first one as well, too. But the footage of Billy and Doug backstage pre-show.
Oh, yeah.
Billy's standing at a keyboard and Doug's standing with him. They're just talking about Billy's throat and the set list that night. So Billy's going through just a couple lines of Mulberry and you could hear his voice is just ripped to shreds. And this is before the show. It goes by if you're not listening to it, but Billy's like not hitting it and Doug comes back with, but that's usually Pete's anyway, right?
Right.
Like Pete usually takes those lines and Billy's like, yeah, but I can usually hit it on my own. And then there's a minute of silence where the two of them are just kind of taking it in. And then Doug just goes, "So you want to play She's Always a Woman or what?" I don't know.
Yeah.
It was just like another one of those exchange of like two guys who've known each other forever.
There's so much subtext to that where Billy's
Mhm.
saying, yeah, but I can usually hit it. It wasn't as much about whether or not he needed to sing it because obviously it was covered. What Billy's communicating is like, no, what I'm telling you is that my voice is fucked. Like, this is how I'm
Right.
checking it. You wonder if like what Doug was doing there was knowing that Billy might be about to go down a bad road mentally and like,
Yeah.
let's not feed into it. If you dismiss it in just the right way, it's going to snap them back in. Like, he's not going to let me go down there. No, we're not doing this, you know?
In my head, they were discussing it prior to him trying to sing. They were
You know
going
what?
over the
Yeah.
set list.
And
Go ahead.
however, I wonder also, and this is us getting nuts and bolts. She's Always a Woman also has that high note. And I wonder if that was part of the conversation. Be like, okay,
Right.
Can I raise a practical question? Are we doing Stonehenge tomorrow night? You know, like, that's-
Yeah, exactly. We're not privy usually to those kind of conversations.
yeah,
Those are private moments backstage at a show where you're trying to dial it in and figure out what you're going to go out there with.
right.
We've overanalyzed that stuff in excruciating detail on the kind of shows that we've played over the years. But like
Mhm.
with Billy, I'm sure he was feeling like the stakes were so high that, like you said there, he was going through that moment of panic. Like, oh man, the show's in 2 hours and I'm screwed.
Yeah.
And Doug trying to wrangle it in. It was just a very vulnerable moment that I appreciated being able to see.
You wonder if he's going through the rest of his catalog and being like, okay, where else am I going to run into a problem? I wonder like how top of mind that stuff is for Billy or for any singer really. Like, do they sort of know which songs are potential problems at all times?
Yeah, like I'm having a rough throat day. Well, these 4 are for sure out.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. That you're not sitting there like in the middle of a song going, oh man, I forgot about the bridge on this.
I know Steve for the last many, many years has been the guy doing the set list, but I
Yeah.
liked seeing Doug kind of talk through it with him. And, he was the sergeant. He was the guy in those days. And, we never really got to see Doug talk
Right.
before. So that's like it. No interview footage, no, none of him talking. I do have audio and I got it from Lib from back in the day.
Mhm.
I'm sure he'll be fine with me sharing it. So I'll ask him, but it's actually Lib and Doug visiting WLIR
Mm-hmm.
in 1980, right when Glass Houses came on. And it's just the two of them and whoever the DJ was on air at the time, just like goofing off for an hour and playing songs.
Oh, wow. All right. Well,
Yeah.
you don't need permission for that. Maybe you taped it yourself. You don't fucking know. No, man. Like, dude, you've been
I was
holding out
7 months.
on
I
that.
knew how to work it.
Yeah. Michael has a bunch of like super duper secret recordings. I mean, not secret, but like stuff that's not out there. And Michael keeps these things so under wraps that the only time I hear them is when we're in the same state, like physically in the same room, and he will like put them on because he won't even email them to me. He won't even play them over the internet to me, which I don't mind. I'm just saying like that's
No,
how
I'll do
far on
that. I
lockdown
don't-
he has
I'm
these
not doing
things. Yeah. And I never heard that
Yeah.
one, you son of a bitch.
Yeah, that one's a trip. I recently rediscovered it. That's why I never talked about it before. I forgot I had it.
Oh,
until
okay.
Fairly recently.
Sure. Yeah. All right.
Because I've been digging through my boxes of stuff for the Ashton
Yeah.
Allen record because we're giving away a bunch of stuff. And I
Right.
found this cassette. I still have the cassette. It was never even digitized until a few months ago.
Oh, wow. All right.
Yeah. So it's not something I've been holding out on for 6 years that I like,
Yeah. I don't know. The way you laugh, that seems like maybe that's your common evil genius laugh. I think you do that more than you let on. Yeah. With your Mr. Burns
Smithers,
fingers.
who's that man? Release the hounds. Yeah. But back to it, that was the only other time, the two of them just off the cuff.
Mhm.
But, there's no video interviews with him. There's no all this stuff. So just to actually get to hear him talk shop is like really cool,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we always love that stuff. We live for that. So it's like, give us more, give us the whole conversation. Like,
I know. Yeah.
we want to hear where they were like passing around the menu. Like, who got the Caesar salad? Jeez,
Yeah,
also got
yeah,
Caesar
yeah.
salad
Like-
this time.
they're playing at such a high level. I just love seeing the stuff that makes it even more relatable.
Yeah.
In this documentary, they expand on the Victor story, talking about, going to the Gorky Park Circus where Victor and his twin brother were performers. At the time, they weren't able to get a hold of Victor, so he wasn't a part of the documentary. And he, in recent years, has resurfaced. Jack and I have been in contact with him over the years. Super nice guy from what we've gathered in our limited interaction with him, but it was such a nice story to tell. And I really appreciated them going a little deeper onto the effect that Victor had, not only on Billy, but the band as well.
This was another nice example of this documentary building on what has become public knowledge from the first documentary, from the song Leningrad, and from retellings of that song. And now we don't have to get as much of that exposition. We can get into that additional information, that additional dimension to it. And that's really what it is. It's dimension. It really is adding, I'll say dimension for a third time, and then I'll shift to saying perspective. But, it adds that dimension, 4, and perspective 2 to everything.
It's a shame that they weren't able to reach him for his, perspective of things. But yeah, it was a really touching story, and he was the champion of giving you my heart. And you see all that footage of him throughout the years of him just like reaching for his chest and throwing it towards the stage, and and just almost having an out of body experience just with the way he's reacting to the music. And somebody else who we didn't talk about who I'm really glad they interviewed in the film was Oleg Smirnov, on stage translator.
Yeah.
And he was not a party man of the Russian government. So he was an independent guy who they got connected with. They didn't, they wanted somebody who was going to be one of the guys and who was going to look out for them and things like that. They interviewed him pretty extensively. And, one of the things he says early on, he's like, my instructions were to stick like gum to Billy. And that's what I did.
We got a little more nuts and bolts with them trying to figure out how to translate things. And I think we've talked about, I think Billy probably thinking through what he's going to say because he can't speak quickly. He probably doesn't want to use, for lack of a better term, big words because you're
right.
Somebody's trying to translate this quickly, and you know you have to speak somewhat bluntly.
There's some interesting footage of the two of them talking. Like most live performers, they've got their moments like between song 1 and 2, they're just going to go right into it. So no talking. But Billy's going to say something before Allentown and something before Baby Grand. And all, so he's going over with Oleg where there's going to be speaking. And there was one moment Billy's like, so if I forget to say that, you'll say that or you'll remind me. And he's like, no, he's like, I'll just say one word, intermission, and something right before Mulberry. So they're kind of going through trying to develop their rhythm of how they're going to, do this. And it must have been difficult for Billy because he's used to just kind of doing his thing, going through it.
Yeah.
And so you have to allow for the gap of the translation, but you also don't want to lose the momentum of what you're saying. So there's all of that. And then on the Oleg side, you don't want to be in the way of the show either. So if he comes on stage, he talks, and then you'll see him kind of recede off stage into the darkness, things like that. And I also got a kick out of the footage of The Longest Time. Near the end, there was that Russian kid who hopped up on stage. And, Billy holds the mic up to him and he's speaking in Russian. And Billy's like, whatever you say, babe. He's like,
right.
What I love seeing was that Oleg kind of comes onto stage from the side a bit more. And he's like, all right, we're not going to cause a scene and throw this guy off stage. But he's like, I can wrangle him off to the side a little bit so he can still kind of be part of the moment, but he's not like in it. So it was just like a nice moment of him like taking a little bit of control, kind of stage managing a little bit too.
Yeah. 2 thoughts on that. One is, speaking of the translation, juxtapose that with all the concerts we've listened to or watched, especially the earlier ones where Billy's like almost doing stand-up. And that just is not going to fly. Even though I think by the time we saw him, a lot of that was relegated to a few good one-liners, stuff like that. When I saw him in Nassau Coliseum, he was talking a little more, but even then they were jabs. They weren't like the big setup. The one I'm thinking of is, what was the one in the Village? The Bottom Line, where he does like the whole intro to like New York State of it's a whole bit. Yeah. And like, that was such a big part of his show for so long. And that is out the door. Not going to happen.
Out the door.
But at the same time, what he always did too was like we've pointed out, especially with his first Madison Square Garden show, he would give away his thoughts, or his thoughts would be expressed when he was tinkling with the piano. The other thing, a piece of mechanics is having Oleg on stage, so it wasn't a disembodied voice. Probably easier for Oleg to visibly see Billy and be that close, like have a visual connection as well when he's trying to translate quickly. But also, does it help the audience, especially like an audience that's used to being watched, that at least we see this person and it's not voice of God.
It's not like somebody watching us. Yeah.
Yeah. Or like, is this actually what he's saying? Or is like somebody up in the booth like, nah, we'll say this. I'm Billy Joel and I love Russia,
Right. Yeah. It would make sense that was a very deliberate move.
Like, imagine if you just heard it booming over a PA and you didn't see who was saying it. It would be weird. It's always weird, like when you watch it on TV, like when they do like an interview with somebody and they start talking and then you hear just like the, and it's always like a real nice in the studio mic, and some poor schmuck just has a lavalier and he sounds tinny.
Right, exactly. Leading up to the whole tantrum thing, what was leading up to that particular moment was, again, Billy being upset because he could see that the crowd wasn't comfortable when the lights would go on. They would finally start to let loose, and then the big house lights would come up because the film crew and Wayne Isham, who we haven't talked about yet, who's the director of the concert footage, is saying, hey, I've got some great coverage, but nobody's going to know anybody was there because they're too dark. And this was way before the days of modern lighting now, where if you watch like Billy Joel 100, where it's not bright, but you could see all the colors and all the people still so vividly. That wasn't the case back then. You really needed to like shine bright lights on the audience if you're going to see them. We see it in Live from Long Island and things like that. Just dipping back into that 1 minute, because we didn't mention it when we talked about it, was I love that they cut to Wayne Isham. He's like, Billy, you overreact.
Yeah.
It was great theater. It was great for the special, but come on. Yeah. And this guy, Wayne Isham, it's funny. I never made the connection. I remember seeing his name in the original credits, but like I more associated him with metal and rock videos. He did a bunch of Metallica videos. He did a lot of the 80s, like hair metal stuff. Like he's like well known as like a rock and metal director.
I guess once you go to Russia and cover somebody breaking a piano, like, you're ready for Metallica. Yeah. You're ready for Enter Sandman or whatever else. Yeah.
And I think he did direct Enter Sandman.
And it would have been great, just we should just make it up as a bit now, is if Oleg was like translating him while he was doing it. Stop letting the audience. Hold on. Shut up, Oleg. Shut up. Oh, sorry. It was the most like culturally insensitive attempt to sound Russian. That was just straight gibberish. That sounded like the backwards part on concert,
Right.
That's all I got. Yeah. That's all I got in the moment. I'm making it up as I go here.
Yeah. So I just did a quick Google search, and there's literally a whole Wikipedia page of music videos that he directed.
Okay.
So this guy's like super, super prolific, and it's a lot of Def Leppard and Pantera and Motley Crue, but he did Enter Sandman, Sabatru, which was I think a live video, like based live footage, and he did Pour Some Sugar on Me, Def Leppard, Bye by NSYNC. There you go.
Oh well,
so he didn't just do rock and metal. That guy is such an interesting character. Like whenever he came on camera, it was kind of a trip.
Not that he wasn't, but like everybody else was like, wow, this and that. And he was just like, yeah, man, you overreacted, or whatever he was saying at the time was like, I dealt with Phil Anselmo. You think this is going to phase me? Like,
right. It's like, yeah, exactly. Oh, and I do like how he gave Billy the props for, when Billy was crowd surfing.
Oh, yeah.
And I guess I took for granted that wasn't super common back then yet. It certainly was in the 90s, though. I'll tell you that much. He's like, oh, for all you rock and rollers out there, I just want to tell you, he's like, Billy Joel was crowd surfing in the 80s before all you, or whatever. It was just the way he framed it was funny. And another poignant moment, too, which I liked, was we saw in the first film as well, Billy going to visit the grave of Vladimir Vysotsky, who was a early 20th century, really a poet set to folk music, kind of like the Dylan of Russia, and didn't have a great voice, but had very powerful lyrics and was revered by the counterculture of Russia. Victor and him were there, and there were lines, like hour lines on like a Tuesday or whatever, whatever the day, to see his grave. Now, granted, this guy passed away at that point, probably 50 years prior. So it wasn't like this had just happened.
Yeah.
It was like the 20s. Billy was really moved by this, and so much so that they made it a point for him to meet his mother. And, she brought him into their house, and just, they were all super warm. But yeah, it was just like a touching moment again, where like Billy connected with the art, and that culture.
I think they said like there were more people there than for Lennon's tomb was the comparison they made. And that brings us to, well, two things. One, I guess, is, some of the new footage that we see of Billy just around town, as it were. And most of this was in the first one where he's talking with the teenagers that are like into metal. And and now we see like this older woman like admonishing them, and Billy like trying to talk to her about it too. And I can't remember exactly the point I drew from this because I can't read my own handwriting, but I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was just something funny about like the woman was like, something that they are animals. They don't represent us, these kids. And it's just funny that like Billy's coming over and playing rock and roll, but by the 80s, it was somewhat establishment.
Right.
But Billy remembers in the 50s when like, the Scuzzballs were listening to rock and roll. And now the Scuzzballs are listening to metal. And like nowadays, you don't have to be a Scuzzball to listen to metal. In the 80s, you still kind of had to,
Right.
That strains the passage of time.
Metal was still very much the counterculture, the underground.
Yeah.
In the 80s, like rock and roll was in the 50s and 60s. And Billy even says to her, he's like, yeah, that's what they used to say about me back when I had long hair and all this
That
stuff.
was it, yeah. And again, they have a good way of tying Billy's visit with what was happening on the international stage and on the national stage there. They were talking about it was the moment where Russia had a choice. That was one of the quotes I wrote down. And, once again, circling back to, music being communicative. Somebody had said, like, at some point during the visit, quote, everything became symbolic. That, again, is how they were balancing, how Billy and the crew felt about this. But with the reality of, like, in the grand scheme of things, they were one small part of it. They were a part of it. They were a part of the revolution that happened. But it's interesting to balance how impactful it was to them and the impact, but not the same sort of impact to the country at large. Like I said, that's a delicate balance. I think they did a good job of it.
Yeah.
Can't read my handwriting again. What I had written was somebody had said it was an unabashed display of emotion. And then I scribbled out display and I wrote something else. I can't remember what it was. He said, Billy was motivated by the oppression of the people. And then what they do definitely is like it was matter of trust at that point. And they put emphasis on the line, the whole situation was wrong, which, it's a love song, but recast here to be about, the bigger situation. And we've talked about that somewhere, like that sort of like how you can take a song in a different context.
Yeah. It gives it a whole different
meaning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was a really nice touch.
I think it was Steve that called it a carny existence that they had, which I got a kick out of. Like, the circus came to Russia in that way.
Yeah. They start to wind the film down, talk about how within the whole organization, there was just a sadness because they had met and made these deep connections with these people. And they all felt that this was such a once in a lifetime thing that they were all just saddened at the prospect of never seeing these people again. There was a happiness at what they did, but a sadness of what they were leaving behind. And there was a lot of reflection on that. Oleg talks a lot about what it really did for the people there. Liberty spent some time talking about, just people crying on the plane home, just so sad about it. Just tears your heart out. The scene of, Victor came to the airport to see them off, and he was just at the very end. He just couldn't even look at him. He just had to walk away. There was just such a sadness there. And there's just a little bit more reflection near the end, how Billy says, that ultimately this was a highlight of a performer and touching this audience that was not like the jaded U.S. audience that was going to see Billy Joel come through town every 2 years. This was such a once in a lifetime thing for the audience, and it really helped him rediscover his love for the material and performing again, which I think he was starting to lose some of as the bridge tour was going on.
As you're recounting that, I can't help but think about when we were invited down to Kentucky for the Fanged Robot show at the beginning of this year, where it was like, I felt pretty bittersweet leaving that. Like it was like, it was put what we did in a different perspective. It was this amazing surreal time where we made all these new friends. But you know what? We can go back there.
Yeah.
Like we could go, we could go visit. Like this was like, we probably won't ever see these people again, like.
Right. Yeah.
That's
a great point.
It's such a more heaviness to it. Like they didn't know the Berlin Wall was going to come down. Everybody was saying like you could feel something happen in the air, but you don't know what it's going to be and you don't know when. It's going to put all your stuff in a different perspective.
Yeah.
And, it's going to humble you. It's going to maybe center you. You have to wonder too, like you said, this is Billy at the height of his career.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like he got too fat of a head, but his head had to get fat somewhat.
Yeah. It's inevitable.
What a paradigm shift that must have been to crest your hot streak, being thrown in a situation where you're having an impact, but you're still such a small thing.
It's one of those things where it can like really inflate the ego or really ground you. And I think it did a little of both.
I think ultimately it grounded him. I think, the way he talked about it in the first documentary, if he was getting smart about it, they wouldn't have been able to cut around it. It would have been in his body language, would have been in everything.
And I did find it interesting that near the end, as the documentary was winding down, they cut to some new interview with Russell Jabbers and Dave LeBolt talking about this also being the end of the band and how they could feel that this was coming to an end as well. In hindsight, they could feel that this was kind of nearing the end of it all. Props to Jim Brown and the team for leaving that in. They didn't get into the nuts and bolts of what happened and why it was the end and all of that, but for them to talk about how, this was also the last hurrah for the band too.
Russell kind of said, a lot of it was in retrospect, but that he felt it in the air, like there was a current, like there was a sort of a premonition that this was it. That's a great juxtaposition of like, you don't know what, you don't know when, something's about to change.
Dave LeBolt did 3 major tours. He did the Nylon Curtain, Innocent Man, and Bridge tours. Mm-hmm. So he was with Billy for arguably his 5 biggest years as a touring artist. He likened it to the military, and it is in the way of like you become this tight unit. We're kind of all in the trenches trying to make this show work, and you get close with these people, and you could tell like how much he cared for the band that that he was playing in, and how sad he was to see it all come to an end. And it was really nice to see, these guys like Dave LeBolt and Kevin Dukes, who we never really got to hear talk about their experiences with Billy.
A great companion to the original documentary. That's what really makes this work so well.
This was produced by Robert Dalrymple and Rick London, who Rick was, I think, a tour director. I'm forgetting his title on the actual tour. And music producer was Jim Boyer, which I love seeing his name in the credits there. It was directed by Jim Brown. And also, heavily credited was the band, which was Liberty DeVito on drums, Kevin Dukes on electric guitar, Russell Jabbers on acoustic and electric guitar, Dave LeBolt on keyboards, Mark Rivera saxophone, Doug Stegmeyer bass, Peter Hewlett backing vocals, George Sims backing vocals, and Oleg Smirnov, Russian translator. Like we said, this premiered on Showtime at the end of January in 2014. It marked an exciting time after a long lull of no new product in the Billy Joel world. You know me, I love when there's new interesting things coming out. It was announced shortly after that this was actually going to be a big physical release campaign. So they announced it actually on February 25th of 2014. So about 3 to 4 weeks after the premiere. I'll just read a little bit from the official press release here. So it says, Billy Joel, A Matter of Trust, The Bridge to Russia, to be released on a 2 CD live album and a DVD/Blu-ray concert film and deluxe edition. This actually was released Tuesday, May 20th of 2014. I remember this very well too, going back to being a gigging musician. My old rock band, September On, we put out a record and disbanded shortly after it came out. So the story goes, I still have a few hundred CDs in my closet there. My band had been largely apart for the 5 years at this point, right? Jim Whitman, our bass player, was still in Michigan, and so was I, but we were getting ready to move west. Phil, who was our guitar player and singer, he's a teacher, and he actually got a teaching job in Tennessee, so he was living down there. Phil, who's the singer there, he turned all his students onto our band and like passed out CDs and like would play the record and all that stuff, and they were really into it. It was a small town in Tennessee, but every year they would do this big like springtime festival. So we get a call from Phil one day. He's like, hey man, would you and Jimmy want to come down to Tennessee and play a show? We hadn't played in forever, right? he booked us to play this festival in Dover, Tennessee, the weekend before this came out. I remember driving home back to Michigan, dropping Jimmy off. And even though I had the deluxe edition, which was the bigger package waiting for me at the house, I stopped in at a Best Buy in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and bought the 2 CD set so I could listen to it on the hour and a half drive home from Ann Arbor. So I remember buying it there, and then getting back home to Michigan, a package waiting for me for Sony. So there was the 2 CD set, which was just the audio you could buy, or you could buy just the concert film on DVD or Blu-ray. But then they also put out this really, really nice box set. It's kind of similar in size to the Yankee Stadium set. So it was available either, and for our viewing audience, in Blu-ray or DVD. And of course, I have them both. A big shout out to our good friend Edward O'Dowd, as he's the art director on this set as well. And so what these deluxe sets included, it was the full 2 CD set. It was the documentary film, and then it was the newly restored and expanded concert, which had way more songs than the original concert film. But on top of all that, it came with a really, really nice booklet with essays and a lot of the professional photos and candid photos from all the shows. It's just a really, really nice set, chock full of great anecdotes, photos that I'd never seen before. Just a great layout done by Edward. And I see that Russell Javers and his wife, some of their photos, things like that. And it's actually still available. So if you guys are still into the physical media thing, you can buy the documentary in the DVD or the Blu-ray set. At the time, this deluxe edition was released with a replica of the Russian poster and then a reprint of the original Russian tour shirt that they had back then. Nice, cool little thing that they did. Just for funsies, I'll show you. I also have a fun little promotional copy of the audio and the film, which is fun too. It's all done on like CDR and DVD-R and things like that, but it's a fun little promotional bit. It's the artwork printed on, color printing. The Sony promotional, the track listing, all these things. It's all basically just fairly plain printing on the discs themselves. But what I thought was interesting, this is obviously called Billy Joel, Matter of Trust, The Bridge to Russia, but on the promotional material, it actually says Concert Deluxe Edition. So they are originally toying around with the idea of using the original album title for this set, but they abandoned that along the way. You can still pick up some of this stuff. And I tell you, for like, $30 to get this book, a documentary, a concert film, and 2 CDs, I mean, you'd be hard pressed to find a better media deal.
It's a very nice package. And speaking of nice packages, let us know what you think of it. What did you think I was going to say? If you remember seeing this, tell us, your thoughts on it. If you've actually seen it recently, that'd be even cooler. Let us know. glasshousespodcast@gmail.com, or find us on the socials under Glass Houses, a Billy Joel podcast. And while you're at it, if you have not given us a 5-star review and or favorable rating on your podcast platform of choice, please go ahead and give us that 5-star rating and or positive review on your podcast platform of choice. If you're watching this on YouTube, like and share, bro. Like and comment,
That's right.
Whatever, and comment, all these things are great ways to help support the podcast, because it tells those almighty algorithms that we are a program of merit, and it'll push us to new viewers and listeners, making it a fast, free, and easy way to support the podcast.
Absolutely. And I also want to thank everyone for indulging me a few weeks back in my side quest with Ashton Allen. It's been a passion project. And Jack, I want to thank you on the show here for just taking so much time with the edit and, taking a lot of care with it. This has been such a fun project to work on with him. And actually, I want to share some cool news. We're actually moving some units, which is exciting. Nice. We're pressing 300 copies of Ashton's debut album, Dewdrops, like I said on the show. As of tonight, we have sold 116 of the 300 copies. We have broken even.
Congratulations, my friend.
We're so happy about that. We're on our way, and you guys have been so great to indulge that, and I hope you guys dig it. And yeah, we still got another 180 or so left. So if you ashtonallen.myshopify.com, and that's going to be the last time I say it on the show. But if you dig it, check it out. And Dewdrops is also on streaming too.
We're hawking a lot of records this episode, huh?
I know. Well, it's exciting to get to support our friends. I know, granted, I'm involved in the one project, but it's like fun, to have some fun stuff to talk about.
Yeah. But with that in mind, I'm going to drop the needle on this guy, and we'll see you soon.
We'll see you soon, everybody.